The girl watched in horror as the huge python strangled the pregnant, completely defenseless cat. She rushed to help, but the python's grip was too strong. Tears streamed down her face as she realized that the cat and her unborn kittens could not be saved. But at that moment, someone completely unexpected came to their rescue. Sarah had always loved animals. Since childhood, she had dreamed of a big house where she could shelter many homeless pets. But for now, that dream remained unattainable. Sarah lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Her one-room apartment was on the second floor of an old brick building. Despite her limited resources, she tried to help homeless animals as much as she could. She especially loved cats. Sarah was a nurse at the local hospital and often worked night shifts. Despite being tired after her shifts, she always found time for her charges. Every morning, she would go outside with a bag of cat food, placing the food in bowls set in secluded spots. The bowls were colorful. Sarah had bought them at the pet store to make the street look more cheerful and bright. Stray cats of different breeds and sizes would gather around. Sarah knew each one by sight and even gave them names. She had grown especially attached to a small black cat with a white patch on her chest. Sarah named her Midnight. Midnight had bright green eyes and a small scar on her left ear. Recently, Midnight had noticeably rounded. She was pregnant and expecting kittens. Sarah worried about the future litter. She knew well that the street was no place for newborn kittens, but her small apartment would be too cramped for them. Living next door to Sarah was an elderly man named John. He was about 70 years old, but looked even older. His gray hair was always neatly combed, and his clothes were ironed. John had been a military pilot and had participated in many operations. His apartment was filled with photos and awards, reminders of his glorious past. He had recently moved to the neighborhood and kept to himself. John rarely interacted with anyone and seldom left his house. His only companion was a large golden retriever named Buddy. But Buddy was not just a dog. He had once been a service dog in the search and rescue unit and had participated in many rescue operations. Sarah tried to befriend her new neighbor. She greeted him whenever they met and tried to strike up a conversation, but John always replied curtly and hurried away. It was clear that socializing was burdensome for him. From other neighbors, Sarah learned John's sad story. It turned out that he had recently lost his only son, Michael. The young man had worked as a rescuer and had died in the line of duty. It happened during a severe forest fire. Michael had been rescuing people from a burning village. After Michael's death, John took Buddy home. It was his only connection to his deceased son. Knowing this, Sarah felt even more sympathy for her gloomy neighbor. She understood his grief and loneliness, but all attempts to befriend him remained unsuccessful. One morning, as usual, Sarah went out to feed the cats and noticed that Midnight was missing. The black cat was usually the first to come for breakfast, but today she was nowhere to be seen. Sarah became worried. At that stage of pregnancy, Midnight should not have gone far. After feeding the other cats, Sarah set out to look for her. She searched the entire street, checking under bushes and in basements. Unfortunately, Midnight was nowhere to be found. Growing increasingly anxious, Sarah called the cat by name, but only the singing of birds and the noise of passing cars responded. She then expanded her search beyond the street. Near the house was a small wasteland overgrown with tall grass. Thorny weeds clung to Sarah's jeans as she made her way through the thickets. She decided to check there too. After a couple of minutes, she suddenly heard a faint meow. Sarah hurried toward the sound, her heart pounding with anxiety. Parting the thick grass, she screamed in horror. Before her was a terrifying scene. A huge python was wrapped around Midnight's small body. The snake was at least 2 meters long, its patterned brown skin glistening in the sunlight. It was slowly tightening its deadly coils. Despite the shock, Sarah guessed that the python had escaped from a neighboring house before attacking Midnight. Its owner was in fear paralyzed Sarah for a moment. A thought flashed through her mind. She was too late. Midnight couldn't be saved. But then the girl pulled herself together. She needed to act, and act quickly. Sarah looked around for something to distract the snake with, but there was nothing suitable, only grass and small stones. In despair, she shouted for help. Her voice echoed across the wasteland, but only silence responded. She tried to pry the snake's tight coils off the unfortunate cat with her hands, but the python's grip was too strong. Sarah was completely desperate and burst into loud sobs. At that moment, something incredible happened. Buddy heard the girl's cries. The dog had just gone out for a morning walk with his owner. His ears stood up when he caught the desperate screams. Pricking up his ears, he barked, drawing John's attention. John looked at the dog in surprise. The usually calm and obedient Buddy was acting very strangely, barking and pulling on the leash toward the wasteland. The old man frowned. Something was clearly wrong. After hesitating for a second, he decided to check what was going on. He let go of the leash and Buddy instantly dashed off. The dog confidently led his owner toward the sound of Sarah's cries, his golden fur glistening in the morning sun. When they reached the scene, John saw his neighbor in a panic, flailing around the huge snake. A small animal, probably a cat, was writhing in the python's coils. Midnight's eyes were wide with terror. Due to the python's strong grip, she could no longer scream and was barely breathing. Despite his age, John acted quickly and decisively. Looking around, he noticed a thick, dry branch nearby. The bark on the branch was peeling in places, exposing the light wood. Picking it up, the old man rushed toward the python. Buddy, sensing the danger, stood next to his owner. The hair on the dog's nape stood on end. He bared his teeth, growling threateningly at the snake, and began attacking it with his sharp fangs and claws. The python, feeling a serious threat, loosened its grip for a moment. That moment was enough for Sarah. She rushed forward and grabbed Midnight by the hind legs. With one pull, she freed the cat from the snake's coils. Midnight let out a plaintive meow but did not resist. Having lost its prey, the python tried to attack Buddy, but the dog deftly dodged the strike. John swung the branch, driving the snake away. For a few seconds, the python swayed menacingly before them, but then it slowly slithered into the grass. The rustling of the grass gave away its movement for some time. Sarah hugged the trembling Midnight to her chest. Tears of horror and relief rolled down her cheeks. She looked gratefully at John and Buddy. Without them, she wouldn't have coped and would have lost her beloved cat forever. During the rescue, Sarah received several scratches from thorny plants, but didn't even notice them in the heat of the struggle for the cat's life. John, recalling the first aid skills he had learned during his service, helped tend to Midnight. After this incident, John and Sarah grew closer. The old man offered to look after Midnight until she gave birth to her kittens. Soon, the cat safely delivered 5 adorable babies. Among Midnight's kittens was one with an unusual color, completely white with different colored eyes, a rare occurrence. Sarah and John cared for the feline family together, eventually finding new owners for the kittens. The story of Midnight's rescue made it to the local news, drawing attention to the issue of homeless animals in the city. This incident changed both their lives forever. John finally stopped avoiding people, and Sarah found a loyal friend and helper. Together, they decided to open a small shelter for homeless animals. In the process of creating the shelter, Sarah and John faced bureaucratic hurdles, but with the support of the local community, they managed to overcome all difficulties. John used his connections among former colleagues to find sponsors for the shelter and provide it with the necessary equipment. A year later, the shelter became a favorite place for many residents of the area. Abandoned animals found homes there, and lonely people found friendship and companionship. John and Sarah began conducting lessons in schools about responsible pet ownership, teaching children the importance of caring for animals. Buddy became a real star of the shelter, helping socialize shy dogs and even babysitting kittens with remarkable gentleness. Sarah started a blog about the shelter's life, which quickly gained popularity and helped find homes for many animals. Every year, on the anniversary of Midnight's rescue, Sarah and John hold an open day at the shelter, inviting everyone to meet its inhabitants and perhaps find a new friend.